Prepare to disembark! I will destroy the Avenger!
You can certainly try, freak show.
Can't reach! Retreat! Retreat!
Now, if that is not a one-to-one recreation of that scene within the MODOK boss fight in this game, I'm going to be extremely disappointed. But anyways, welcome back, true believers and all you merry Marvelites, to another very interesting Marvel's Avengers related video. And since we now have a brand new character added within the overall roster of playable heroes within Marvel's Avengers, alongside of the fact that I have done this particular topic for every other hero that has been confirmed so far, I thought it'd be fun if we were to go over my personal top 5 picks of the main suits that I believe we need to see be featured for Hawkeye within the Avengers project. Now, if you're all aware of my personal tastes at this point, you know that I don't really care all that much when it does come to alternate suits, and usually I'll just wear the default look that does come with the character at hand. However, I do think I will make an exception for the case of Hawkeye. Considering the main look that we have seen of him in action so far within his reveal trailer, there's not really a whole lot that's special going on with his costume other than the fact that he is indeed bald in this universe, as well as having the addition of a hearing aid. And yes, while the developers did make thoroughly clear that this particular look of Hawkeye is directly influenced from the Matt Fraction Hawkeye run, I still would prefer a little bit more quote-unquote pizzazz when it does come to trying to make Hawkeye's look a bit more unique. But on the flip side, we also received a slight glimpse of some concept art showcasing one of the alternate looks that Hawkeye will have within Marvel's Avengers, which in this specific case is directly inspired by the My Life as a Weapon comic run. But if anything, this appearance makes him look a little bit more like the actor who plays Arrow on the CW show with that of Stephen Amell. But regardless, I'm still intrigued to see how exactly this costume will look in the game compared to how we see it now in concept art form. And adding on to the current looks that we do have of Hawkeye so far with his default costume as well as the concept art image, we do have a relatively small tease from one of the game's previous developers showcasing a possible suit which will most likely be added in the game one way or another, especially considering the fact that this particular costume is a fan favorite. So coming directly from the senior outsourcing artist who previously worked on Marvel's Avengers of Diego Terran, he did state the following the day of the War Table stream, talking directly about Hawkeye himself. And as he went on to state, finally they reveal Hawkeye. I'm happy to say that I made all of his weapons: bow, arrows, and katana? That's right, can't wait to show off a lot more things I have created for heroes like Hawkeye in Marvel's Avengers. And yes, if you didn't manage to notice within the Hawkeye trailer, in this particular screenshot, we do see that he is in fact wielding a katana. And if any of you hardcore Marvel fans know exactly what that pertains to, that is directly in regards to none other than Ronin, which is one of Hawkeye's alternate personas. So just as a quick briefing for those of you who aren't familiar with the Ronin persona, following being resurrected from death, Hawkeye decided to take a break from his superhero identity. In the guise of Ronin, he joined the new Avengers team while they were locked in conflict with Iron Man's team of Avengers. And following these events, it was shortly after his faction learned that the Earth was once again being invaded by the Skrulls, now very determined to take over the Earth as their own. But on the other hand, for those of you who may not be all that familiar with the Ronin comic lore, you will most likely recognize the suit from how it was showcased within Avengers Endgame. So seeing that we already have quite a bit of evidence indicating that the Ronin suit will one way or another be featured within Marvel's Avengers, it just makes me curious to see how exactly it will look within this universe's design. Because I know for a fact that if the game's design of the Ronin suit is indeed extremely detailed, then it might just be one of my go-to costumes to wear for Hawkeye in the game. Unless my second choice on the list ends up taking its place, which I really hope that it does. So following that of the Ronin costume, my second choice goes directly to one of the most famous versions of the Marvel Universe within the comics, none other than that of the Ultimate Universe. And in this case, we're directly talking about Ultimate Hawkeye. So besides just looking incredibly cool for a Hawkeye costume, it does have a very cool lore explanation behind why Clint decided to dress this way. So coming directly from the narrative of the Ultimate comics, with the huge betrayal in the second Ultimate series still fresh in Clint's mind, he decided to become a much darker version of himself, which included more use of firearms and a new costume which was controversial to say the least. Sporting the familiar black and purple, but with a mask that covers his face. The one detail that stands out the most to fans is the bullseye indicated on his forehead. The bullseye itself was so prominent and obvious that it was called out by one of his teammates as him having a death wish, following with what happened to his family. However, as the series went on, the costume didn't really last for too long. But in my personal opinion, this is one of the best modernized versions of Hawkeye's costume that we have received so far. I've always really appreciated the more current designs that the Ultimate Comics have always tried to strive for, and Hawkeye is no exception. And for me, the best features about this particular suit obviously goes to the mask, goggles, and the bullseye on the front of his forehead. Now, as for whether or not Hawkeye will end up using guns in Marvel's Avengers, I don't think that will be the case, but I still think that this cosmetic will definitely be a great appearance for him to have in the game's universe. Moving on to the third choice on my list, which is an obvious pick for anyone who's into Hawkeye, as well as an obvious fan favorite which will most likely be in the game, is none other than his classic costume. For starters, we all know that the base roster of heroes will all have their classic costumes equipped within Marvel's Avengers. Given the fact that if you manage to pre-order the game, you will receive every single character's classic outfits within a pre-order bonus. And even though Hawkeye isn't a part of that particular suit pack, I still think that his classic costume is a no-brainer to have whatsoever. In my opinion, this suit is straight up iconic, and it makes me a little bit agitated that we didn't see anything like this either within the MCU or the current design that we do have for Hawkeye within the Avengers project. Now again, I do understand that this particular look of Hawkeye is directly inspired by the Matt Fraction run, but I still would have preferred something a bit more exciting. And when, not if, but when they actually decide to include the classic costume for Hawkeye within Marvel's Avengers, that is definitely going to be a great outfit to see on display. Now, as we draw closer to the end of my list, we're now reaching a suit which I believe is extremely underrated and also relates to another group of superheroes within the Marvel Universe, with that of the X-Men. Plus, this one small feature of this costume completely differentiates it from all the other suits that we have seen so far. So, if the canon universe's version of Marvel's Avengers decides to make Hawkeye deaf within the narrative of the game, then I think it would be very cool if this alternate suit were indeed to include another disabled feature for Hawkeye, with that of him being blind. And in this case, I'm mainly referring to his one-of-a-kind Mutant X costume. And as a brief synopsis for the origin of this suit, in the Mutant X comics, Hawkeye is blind, wearing a blindfold that covers his eyes. The story takes place on Earth 1298, but Hawkeye retains his powers from Earth 616, including the ability to hit targets with extreme accuracy even though he's blind. And primarily on the cover of Mutant X Volume 1 Issue 30, he's wearing a trench coat which provides him a little bit more layers of armor while in combat. And even though Hawkeye and the rest of the Avengers are successful in overpowering their current foes, he's eventually taken out by Captain America working for the forces of evil. So in short, while this is an alternate universe version of Hawkeye, I do thoroughly appreciate the differentiation that he has not only in his narrative, but also in the way that he dresses. However, the only problem that I could possibly think of with this suit is that if it does pertain to the X-Men, would that mean that other characters could receive X-Men related suits as well, or even further include the X-Men within this game as future heroes? Now, in my eyes, I don't see this outfit as anything more than a purely cosmetic attire, and any story purpose that it could possibly relate to with that of the X-Men has been completely thrown out the window. This is solely and strictly an Avengers game, so I don't think having other characters like that of the X-Men, Fantastic Four, Guardians of the Galaxy, and so on will be included as post-launch heroes in any way, shape, or form. And finally, the very last outfit that we do have on this list is actually my personal favorite suit that we do have of Hawkeye in live action, directly within that of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Besides the obvious missing factor of the hair, the way that Clint is outfitted within Marvel's Avengers isn't really all that different from what we've seen within the MCU. And due to the fact that all of the Marvel's Avengers developers are well aware that the MCU suits are probably the most requested outfits to be featured within this game, it would only make sense if they were to include the costumes for one, if not all, of the characters either one way down the line, whether or not that be within the game itself or with that of the microtransaction suits that we have to buy with real life money. And even though I will personally not be spending a single dime on the game's online store just to buy a simple cosmetic outfit, I am actually really hoping that the Age of Ultron Hawkeye suit does make an appearance within the game one way or another. Believe it or not, this is hands down my favorite version of Hawkeye's costume that we have seen within the MCU. I'm mainly a fan of the much more layered look it has, while also also sporting a coat instead of that of his sleeveless tank top that he usually wears. Not to mention that the overall maroon/burgundy color that this suit has is much more appealing in my opinion than that of the bright or dark purple. You can see that color bleed through multiple layers of the suit while also providing a lot more depth than the standard outfit that he usually wears. Nonetheless, we'll just have to wait and see as to exactly which suits Crystal Dynamics have in mind for Hawkeye to be included within the game once he himself is added post-launch after the game releases. And with all that said, everyone, that's the video I have for you today, and please let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. What is your personal top 5 list of suits that you want to see for Hawkeye within Marvel's Avengers, and which one do you want to see in the game the most? As it turns out, I would actually make it a tie between that of the Ultimate Comics Hawkeye costume as well as that of his Mutant X attire. Both of these particular suits are much more appealing for me personally compared to what we currently have now in the game itself. And no matter what happens, just keep your fingers crossed that we'll still be able to unlock a plethora of cool suits within the game without having to resort to microtransactions. Because I can tell you now that if it turns out that every single one of the MCU suits is locked behind a paywall, that's not going to go over too well for the consumers at hand. But until next time, everyone, thank you all so much for watching, stay merry Marvelites, and peace out.
Keep up, old man.
Nobody would know. Nobody. The last I saw him, an Ultron was sitting on him. Yeah, I'll be missed. That quick little bastard.